Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I'm joined by Greg, recruiting extraordinaire of Hail Varsity. And you may have been expecting Steve, but instead it's me. I'm back. And it's still Greg. Greg, how are you?
I am well. Welcome back. I am happy to not have to fumble through calling myself the recruiting extraordinaire. That was tough. Like it just felt weird. Like to be honest with you,
You could
it's
have
fine.
made Steve call you the recruiting extraordinaire. He could have handled that.
See, that's why I have to have you around. That was a very quick solution that you thought of right there on the spot. Thanks.
Now, I will say, if you are somebody who's like, Erin, you're great, but we like Steve better, first and foremost, fine, but also how dare you? But second, I did tell Greg that I'd love to see more of those videos with Greg and Steve as well. So we do have plans heading into 2022 of even more unique video content here on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel. You'll see more of these recruiting videos of the week with Greg and I, but we are also going to add more. So you'll see more of Steve. Hopefully we can wrangle Jacob into some basketball talk, volleyball. We obviously have some top experts on our staff between both Brandon and Jacob. We'll get everything covered for you. We're about to head into baseball and softball season, so plenty to talk about, plenty to have here on this channel. So in addition to everything like podcasts and press conferences, you name it, we will also be including and not including, I should say, what's the word I'm looking for? We will be creating, that's the word, even more unique content. So just stick with us, subscribe. We're happy to have you, and I'm happy to be back. So let's just jump into this, Greg. You have two questions this week that are kind of related. One comes from Corey, who wants to know what the best way to rank roster movement changes during the offseason now that the transfer portal exists. But with that said, Viking Husker, whose name is peaked in college, come on, support yourself now. But they want to know, how do the transfers factor into overall recruiting rankings for Nebraska and beyond? So it's a lot of transfer portal talk. Greg, you can start wherever you want with these two, it's almost like 2.5 questions. Well, it's two, but I'm saying like they kind of like add to more to them. So take it away. You're the expert.
Yeah, it's interesting and it's tough because I feel like the transfer portal exploded so quickly and became such a big thing faster than I guess recruiting services could really account for them. Like there are some rankings out there from various recruiting services about like the ranking, like the like how good transfers are, like putting them kind of like they were high school product or prospects and ranking them, and then trying to rank transfer recruiting classes. But that's still not really an exact science. Not that recruiting really is an exact science to begin with anyway. Just because what are you ranking those players based off of? Are you rating them based off of their original high school ranking, or are you basing them off of their college production so far? And both of those have pitfalls, right? If you're doing it off of high school ranking, that's basically could not be valid anymore if it's been a couple of years that that player has been in college. If you're doing it based off of the college ranking or what they've done in college, that can be tough too, because you could have a player that just hasn't played all that much in college and you're really still talking about potential. Then how do you factor in guys like say Samari Toure from last year that came to Nebraska that is coming from Montana and you don't know how he fits and all of that. So it's just really tough. Or a guy like Kenneth Walker coming from Maryland to then go to Michigan State and winning the Doak Walker. Like people didn't see that coming, and I would assume that he would have been the top rated transfer if you could do that all over again. So it's really difficult. And so that does kind of play into then how you factor the ratings in when it comes to like transfer. So Nebraska obviously has 8, 9 now transfers. I was tracked because there's so many.
All the transfers.
All the transfers. Like every day I feel like there's somebody that is transferred in. And so because of that, you do, in this particular instance, you have to factor that into how I think you think about Nebraska's 22 recruiting class. But at the same time, they're two separate things, right? And so that traditional recruiting class is ranked a lot differently than what it would be if you factored in these transfers, because once you factor in just say Casey Thompson, that would elevate Nebraska's recruiting ranking. So you just kind of have to take it piecemeal, but also think of it as a whole because there isn't a perfect system right now for including that. I think that if there was a system to combine both the high school / junior college recruiting and the transfer portal, Nebraska would be rated a lot higher than what they are with just their traditional high school class. But even that high school class or the traditional recruiting class is growing because or coming up the rankings, because with the addition of Anthony Grant, what happened over the weekend, the junior college running back from New Mexico Military Institute, he's now a 4-star and he's the top rated junior college running back coming out this year. So that boosted Nebraska's class. I say all of that to say that it's difficult. And I think that the way that we kind of rank these things is evolving and changing as the transfer portal continues to evolve and grow as a feature in college football.
Yeah, and I mean, we did talk about this quite a bit in November and heading into the December early signing period, that um, it was important not to like overhype anything, because obviously there were still, and there still are, there was a lot of unknowns then, there are still a lot of unknowns now, but we did know that Nebraska would likely end up using the February traditional date for high school recruiting a little bit more significantly than the Huskers have in years past. And that was going to ultimately change things. Now, is it going to like move Nebraska to #1 in the rankings? Of course not. But it did have the opportunity to shift things a little bit, to make things better than they maybe looked a month or a month and a half ago. We did know going into this recruiting season that Scott Frost had said they were going to put a bigger focus on the transfer portal. That has panned out exactly as we were told it would. So it does make things a little bit more challenging, because I know when we have these conversations, people want to know, what does it mean? What do the rankings look like? What is it going to mean for Nebraska long term? Obviously, with the college football championship and everything, people like to look at those teams and look at the 5-stars, the 4-star recruits, and then how does Nebraska compare? All of those things are still really legitimate criticisms, feedback, all of that thing. Like, I don't want to like take away from that, but this is just what kind of we had been pointing out prior to now, that the way that Nebraska was focusing this recruiting class was that the early signing period did not look like it was going to be as big of a deal for 2022 as the transfer portal and then more traditional signing period in February. So it's going to be interesting, because I don't know how the recruiting class ranking is ultimately going to play into what Nebraska's it's probably, the ranking is not going to look as great on paper as maybe the talent that Nebraska brought in, but I also don't want to like take away from anyone who is still critical. Like, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I still get it. But there's a lot to be excited about with some of these transfer players. Like, I think they have the potential to make immediate impacts. We know what Mickey Joseph has done so quickly, especially looking in the state of Louisiana. So there's a lot to still be excited about. I kind of think you can feel a couple of different ways about this class right now. And the transfer portal, I think, is definitely the part that's going to make people a little bit more excited, because while it might not factor into specific rankings, you still look at the talent and you can go, well, that's great. Like, look at what this person was coming out of high school and what they've been able to do since. And you hope it then translates.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way that that people have to view this class. And I guess I would also say though that the transfer portal, kind of like college football free agency, and people have been kind of dubbing it, all of that, I think it being an early and deliberate strategy for this particular class, I think was a smart move by Nebraska to try and get out ahead of that, because I think that there needed to be a balance of trying to bring those players to make that immediate impact in that could also get in mid-year. I think that has been kind of we've seen that become a really big focus, is I think every one of the transfers that have come in to Nebraska or committed to Nebraska so far are mid-year guys that are trying we record this on Monday, is trying to get into the semester that starts tomorrow, January 18th. So there's going to be a lot of people that are coming in this week. And I think that for winter conditioning and for the start of the semester, so they can have the maximum amount of time that was very much on purpose. Like Nebraska wanted almost all of those guys in for that. So that took a lot of planning, and that also took being able to land those guys as well. So there are some good things within that, but you're 100% correct in that there are still things to be critical of about the recruiting class, because in a way, how you got to this point where you needed those transfers, something kind of had to go wrong on the front end of that, even though you might have made up for it in the end and it could end up working out. But that doesn't mean that there weren't things to be critical of that happened beforehand.
Like I said, there's so many ways to like look at this
Mm-hmm.
recruiting class, and there's going to be a lot of discussion heading into spring football, which, I mean, we're going to get a pretty early look because with the spring game earlier this year than in years past, because Nebraska is going to be replacing the turf of Memorial Stadium. I mean, we're looking at end of February for spring football to get started. So we're going to get a pretty, early idea of what we're looking at, where, I mean, obviously we've said this before, we get a very small amount of time to see practice, but it's still something is better than nothing. So assuming that we get the same amount of time to see the team and just access that we've had previously, we'll have at least a little bit of a better understanding what Nebraska is up against and what some of these transfers can do immediately, what that impact is going to look like. Now, if you want more on this particular topic, because who doesn't want to talk more about transfer portal, Greg will have more in tonight's recruiting notebook at hailvarsity.com. That is, just head over to hailvarsity.com, bookmark the recruiting notebook. It goes live Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central, but on Mondays, he dives more specifically into the topic we talk about in this video. So you might as well just go get yourself ready right now. There's also plenty of content when it comes to recruiting. We'll have plenty more. I've said the word plenty enough, but it's true. There's a lot there for you to read. But there's, like I said, spring football is going to be here before you know it. Baseball and softball season are going to be here before you know it. We're still rolling through basketball season, which, is what it is. The women are crushing it. I know they've had a couple of losses, still fighting their butts off, and so really excited. We'll see what happens, but you just go subscribe, bookmark hailvarsity.com. Is that a good enough pitch?
I think it is. That is plenty for you to pitch.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate all of your knowledge and expertise, Greg. We will be back next week with even more on recruiting. So if you have a specific question, feel free to leave it in the comments here on YouTube, but you can also just continue this conversation. Greg will hop in and answer your questions or chime in if there are things that you want to know more about. But you also might see your questions or this conversation continued elsewhere in other recruiting notebooks, other conversations on the website. So don't hesitate. You can also tweet at Greg at GregSmithHV on Twitter, or at Hail Varsity. So I'd love to hear from you. Keep having the conversation. We appreciate you subscribing, watching, spending time with us. We couldn't do it without you. Greg, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you and welcome back.
Thank you. We'll talk to you all later.